Welcome back to our channel, everyone. Today, I'd like to invite you to spend a few minutes with me listening to a gentle yet haunting story. One that might seem ordinary on the surface, but carries profound lessons about life, choices, and the value of trust. The story is called Three Missed Rides. It's about two young friends who have just graduated from college in the US, now standing at the threshold of their future. One decides to return to their hometown, while the other chooses to stay behind and chase the dream of building a career in a foreign land. But then, three rides, the ride to the airport, the ride to a job interview, and even the ride of belief, are each missed. Not because of fate, but because of seemingly insignificant choices from the past. Have you ever thought that skipping a bus fare just once or failing to return a library book could actually affect someone's entire future? Stay with me until the end of this story, because sometimes it's the smallest things we overlook that shape the strength of the path we walk. Now, let's step into the story of Three Missed Rides. Let's get started. The June sky over New York was clear and blue, like a blessing for the fresh graduates. The music school campus shimmered in the sunlight, filled with laughter, congratulations, and the constant click of cameras capturing the last moments before everyone stepped out of their youthful dream. In that crowd stood David and Tony, best friends who had made it through 4 years of college together, lingering quietly beside each other, their eyes distant amid the cheers of their classmates. Tony, quiet and practical, had decided to return to his hometown right after graduation. He said he wanted to work where he was born and raised, where his family was waiting. In contrast, David, ambitious and full of confidence in his own abilities, chose to stay in the US. He believed that with his honors degree, a bright future in the land of opportunity was within reach. He had already imagined himself working at prestigious firms, in brightly lit offices, living the so-called American dream. But reality had already begun beating its first drums. That evening, as Tony returned to his room to finish packing, he found David sitting silently in front of a dark computer screen. Gone was the usual confidence. David looked visibly lost and frustrated. He had just come back from an interview he was sure he'd nail. He said his resume was stronger than anyone else's, his degree top-notch. But just minutes in, the recruiter turned him down without a second thought. Maybe, Tony gently offered. They weren't looking for someone that specialized for the role. David didn't respond, but doubt had already taken root. The next day, Tony would leave the US. He thought packing would be easy, but it dragged on longer than expected. David, meanwhile, had a packed interview schedule and couldn't take him to the airport. Both of them understood there wouldn't be a dramatic farewell, no tearful hugs, no drawn-out goodbyes. That's how real life works. People drift apart, not because of tears, but because of schedules. That night, when everything seemed to be in place, Tony suddenly remembered something important. He hadn't returned his library book. Worse, tomorrow was the deadline, and his student ID, the only way someone else could return it for him, was in his wallet. He rushed downstairs, asked the driver to open his luggage, and made his way back to campus in the middle of the night to finish this one last responsibility before leaving the country. An hour later, when Tony came back to the room, everything was still dark. David hadn't turned on the lights. No music, no typing, just silence and an unspoken sadness hanging in the air. Tony was surprised. He thought his friend would be at the airport or packing like he was. But David was still there, sitting quietly in the dark. David admitted that he too had returned to campus. Like Tony, he had a library book to return. To him, borrowing means returning. It was a matter of principle. But that wasn't the only reason he missed his flight. The morning's interview had left a deep scar. He'd applied to a top firm, a place he'd dreamed of working at. But just like before, the recruiter glanced at his resume and rejected him on the spot. The reason? No suitable position available. David was angry. He suspected discrimination. He even considered suing for bias against foreigners. But that afternoon, David went to a smaller company, one where he thought he had a real shot. The position fit his major, and he had prepared a detailed presentation. But the result was the same, a rejection, though this time with regret. When David pressed for the reason, the recruiter, almost apologetically, told him quietly, "You have 3 transit violations on your record, specifically fare evasion on the bus." David was stunned. 3 unpaid bus fares. Something he once saw as minor, insignificant, was now casting a shadow over his future. He couldn't understand how an entire society could turn its back on him over a few unpaid rides. But Tony, calm and measured, explained that in developed countries like the US, they might spend millions rehabilitating people who've committed major crimes, but are extremely strict with things like fare evasion or unreturned library books. Not because they're petty, but because they believe if someone can't be honest in the small things, they probably won't be honest in the big ones either. Skipping the fare is greed, Tony said. Borrowing without returning is defaulting. One broken promise can ruin 1,000 others. David stayed silent. No arguments. In that dark room, with the soft hum of the fan and the pale streetlight spilling in from the window, both of them understood something. Some of life's most important lessons don't come from lectures or textbooks. They come from the cold, hard truth of the real world. And that is the story of 3 missed buses. One time, not buying a bus ticket. One time, not returning a library book. Things that seem trivial, fleeting, but can leave marks in one's record and in the trust others place in us. In a society where discipline and transparency are fundamental, honesty, even in the smallest tasks, cannot be overlooked. Today's story is not just about David or Tony. It is a gentle yet profound reminder for all of us. Every action, no matter how small, reflects our character. And when you lose the trust of society, it doesn't just make you miss an opportunity. It could make you miss an entire lifetime. If you followed this far, I believe you can also feel the value this story brings. Live honestly, starting with the smallest things. Reputation cannot be built in a day, but it can be lost in a moment. If you found this story thought-provoking, don't forget to like, share the video to spread the positive message, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video, where we will continue our journey of discovering the deep lessons hidden behind seemingly simple stories. Wishing you a peaceful day. Goodbye, and see you again.